The seas off Eastwatch had teeth. They snapped at the hull, throwing spray into the air that froze the moment it touched the rigging. The sky was a low lid of gray, the horizon indistinct where water met cloud. The ship's timbers groaned. Ropes creaked. Men cursed at the cold. "Eastwatch ahead!" someone shouted. Shapes resolved out of the mist. A squat tower, a jagged, ice-coated wall. Wooden docks that looked as if they had been built in defiance of the sea rather than with its grudging cooperation. Black-cloaked figures moved along the battlements, spears in hand, their forms stark against the pale. "Crows," the captain muttered, cheerful welcome as ever. Davos Seaworth hung onto the rail and tried not to show his discomfort. He had sailed worse in his life. Storms that tossed ships like toys, pirates who thought a humble onion smuggler would be easy meat. He had lost more than fingers to the sea's whims. But this cold, this creeping, all-consuming cold that seemed to slide under his nails and into the gaps where his knuckles had once been, felt different. "Eastwatch ahead!" someone shouted again, unnecessarily. Davos's gaze dropped to the cargo at his feet. Crates, lashed to the deck, there would dark and damp. Each was stamped with a crude sigil, Stannis' crowned stag over the stylized dragon of Dragonstone. Men had cursed under their breath loading them. They cursed still, some out of superstition, others out of irritation. "Stone," Davos reminded himself. Just stone. Black stone, he remembered. Glass, not stone, really. Dragonglass to some, obsidian to others. Spearheads and daggers ground out of the mountain that had watched over Dragonstone since before men whispered of the narrow sea. He had watched the craftsmen work. Some had grumbled that they were wasting their skill on ugly blades instead of pretty baubles. Others had grown quiet as they chipped and shaped, as if they, too, felt the weight in the black glass. Stannis had stood over them all, jaw set, as if he could will each shard to bite deeper when the time came. Now the cargo thumped against the hull as the ship eased in. Ropes were thrown, caught, made fast. The dock rose and fell with the swell. Davos stepped down onto it, knees bending automatically to take the shock. A man in black approached. He was thin as a mast, all angles and irritation. His beard was a wild tangle sprouting from a face that had forgotten how to smile. "Cotter Pike?" Davos asked. "I..." The man grunted. "You're Stannis' fish." "Davos Seaworth," Davos said. "He sends this." He gestured to the crates. Pike's gaze flicked to them, then back. "Dragonglass," he said. "We've a letter said as much. You lot dig it out of your rock, send it north, expect us to be grateful." "Stannis expects nothing," Davos said. "He does what he thinks is right, and curses the world for not appreciating it. The rest of us do what we can." Pike snorted. "Crows take charity where we can find it," he said. "Get it off the ship then. We'll send a train to Castle Black. The old bear will want to see the king's toys." Davos looked up at the distant line of the wall. Even here, at its end, it loomed. The stories he had heard as a boy, of monsters beyond, of shaggy men with ice in their blood, had seemed like tales to make dockbrats behave. Now, with the weight of Jeor Mormont's letter in his memory and Stannis' grim insistence in his ear, the ice looked less like a border and more like an old scar. "Maybe the world's finally looking in the right direction," he murmured. The armory at Castle Black glowed like the inside of a dragon's mouth. Forges roared. Sparks leapt. The air was thick with heat and the smell of hot metal, sweat, and charcoal. A shock after days in the courtyard's freezing breath. Men from Eastwatch stamped their feet, grateful for the warmth even as it stung their faces. Davos wiped his brow with the back of his hand. "Feels like Dragonstone," he said. "If Dragonstone had no sea and more crows." Jon Snow stood beside him, cloak thrown back, dark hair damp from the steam. "This is more heat than we've had in years," Jon said. The forges weren't used for much but mending nails and sharpening old swords. "Now," he gestured to the piles on the table. "Dragonglass, pieces chipped from larger stones, dark and glossy. Spearheads, their points wickedly sharp. Dagger blanks, arrowheads, all labeled with a smudged mark in chalk. Sizes, shapes, intended uses. Daemon held one up. "See the groove?" he said, showing it to Davos and Jon both. "You aren't just shoving this onto the end of a stick and hoping. The shaft must be cut to fit. Leather here, here, and here. And you do not swing it at armor as if it were steel. This is a stinger, not a club." "You sound like you've done this before," Davos said. Daemon's mouth quirked. "Different continent," he said. "Different monsters. Same principle. Some things don't like being introduced to volcanic glass." He passed the spearhead to Jon. The glass felt almost warm to Jon's touch, as if it retained some memory of the mountain it had been carved from. Its edges were so sharp they seemed to shave the air. "Thank your king," Daemon told Davos. "He sent us better odds than most men south could be bothered to." Davos shrugged. "He'll say the Lord of Light told him to," he said. "I say there are worse ways to spend a mountain than grinding it up to stab dead men." Jon glanced at him. "You've seen them?" he asked. "The dead?" Davos's jaw tightened. "I've seen men come back from things they shouldn't," he said. "And I've seen what Melisandre can do with shadows and king's blood. I've not seen your pale demons. I hope I never do. But I've read the letters. I've seen what this lot," he nodded toward Daemon, toward the smiths, toward the pile of black glass, "are willing to do for the sake of staying on this side of the dirt. That's enough." Daemon watched the Onion Knight curiously. "You'll go back to Dragonstone," he said. "Tell Stannis what you've seen. He'll want proof." Davos snorted. "He'll want wights in chains and walkers' heads on spikes," he said. "I'll tell him what I told him before, that the world is wider than his map and darker than his gods. He'll glower and do what he thinks is right regardless. Then we share one trait at least," Daemon said. Jon set the spearhead down. "Does it ever end?" he asked suddenly. "Shaping, planning, sending letters, grinding glass. It feels like bailing a boat with a spoon while the leak gets bigger." "No," Daemon said simply. "It doesn't end. Not until somebody's wall falls. But it changes. That's what we're doing now. Changing the shape of the fight. You feel it, don't you?" Jon thought of the fist, of the pyre, of the captured moment when Longclaw had met the walker's sword and won. "Yes," he said. "Good," Daemon replied. "Hold on to that. When the fear tries to flatten you, remember that even the dead can be surprised." The sea between Qarth and Pentos glittered like hammered silver. Daenerys Targaryen stood at the prow and let the wind tug at her braids. The salt spray tasted fresher than the dust of the red waste, cleaner than the perfumes of Qarth. Drogon wheeled above, a dark shape against the hard blue. The galley rode easily, its oars shipped for the moment, its sail bellied with a favorable wind. The men at the ropes glanced uneasily up whenever Drogon screeched, but they did not break. They had seen worse in the Qarthine caravans that had nearly swallowed them. Behind Daenerys, a low table had been set up on the deck. A map lay upon it, corners weighted by small stones. Essos, its peninsulas and cities rendered in ink and careful strokes. Pentos to the west, Slaver's Bay to the south. Beyond the narrow strip of parchment that marked the narrow sea, the crenellated outline of Westeros weighted in faint lines. "You cannot conquer what you cannot reach," Jeor Mormont said, tapping the map with one thick finger. "You have no ships for the narrow sea, no armies, no coin for sellswords who would not betray you to the First Lord who offered more. The slave cities offer both," he went on. "Armies you can free, riches you can claim. The east is where you build a ladder. The west is where you climb it. The Red Priestess, taller than Melisandre, her robes a slightly different shade of scarlet, her ruby dimmer, watched them both. The flames showed her snow," she said softly, "and a wall of ice, and a boy with a wolf at his side, standing beside a dragon the world thought dead. The ladder may not be where you think, Mormont." Daenerys listened. Her hand rested on the rail, fingers tapping a slow, restless rhythm. "I will not walk blindly into another man's war," she said. My father's madness burned enough of this world. My brother's arrogance finished what was left. If I go west, it will be on my own terms. Not because some priest's fire showed me another Targaryen hogging the dragonfire there. You are not your father, Jorah said. No, she said. I'm my own monster. She looked back at the map. Essos first, she decided. Slaver's Bay. If I free those in chains, if I build something that is mine, then when I cross the narrow sea, if I cross, the West will know I come as more than just another pretender with a famous name. The priestess inclined her head. Chains are chains, she said, whether of iron or of ice. Break some, and the Lord of Light is pleased. I don't care if your God is pleased, Daenerys said. I care if my people are. The ones I have and the ones I will have. She looked west, somewhere beyond that line of blue, beyond the faint ink mark on the parchment. A wall of ice reared up. An old man rode a dragon he should not possess. A boy with a wolf carried a name he did not yet accept. Tell your God, she said to the priestess, that if he wants me there, he can keep the snow from killing my allies before I arrive. Drogon shrieked. He dove, skimming the waves, then soared again, trailing steam. Daenerys smiled. We'll get there when we're ready, she whispered. And if you've broken the world too much to share, Uncle, I will be very cross. The Iron Bank did not often concern itself with ghosts. Debts were its meat and drink owed called balanced. The interest on a crown's folly fed more clerks than most kings did. Wars were numbers in ledger columns. Famines were fluctuations in repayment schedules. Yet the words in the letter from the far north had found their way into a conference room regardless. The banker who read it was thin and gray, his hair pulled back in a tight queue. His hands were steady, the nails trimmed short. Lines at the corners of his eyes suggested he smiled sometimes. Not often. If the wall falls, no king's coin will keep the dead from his door, he read. He let the parchment fall to the table, and one of his colleagues asked. The room was sober, all dark wood and carved stone. Ledgers lined the shelves, bound in leather, labeled in a dozen scripts. A map lay spread on the table, the 7 kingdoms and the free cities picked out in neat, measured strokes. And, the reader said, if the wall falls and the dead sweep south, every army we have invested in is moot, every fortress a liability. Carts do not carry gold well when the horses pulling them have blue eyes. A clerk near the wall snorted before he could catch himself. We are entertaining the fantasies of old men in fur, he said. The watch has been begging for coin for generations. Now they dress their pleas in stories. The banker turned his head. 2 dragons, he said. 1 girl, 1 old man, both of Targaryen blood, both moving in ways that upset existing balances. Letters from Dragonstone confirm shipments of obsidian north. Letters from Winterfell confirm dead men that burn blue if not burn black. We ignore cross-corroboration at our peril. Another banker tapped the map where the wall was marked. What would you have us do? She asked. We are not a temple to send prayers. We are a bank. We do not send armies. We send ships, the reader said. Loans, favor, information. We have client kings in every corner of this board. If one side topples, the others sway. He looked at the little carved ship model in the corner, an old thing, dust motes gathering on its sails. Someone long ago had carved the Night's Watch's crow sigil on its prow. An old loan, paid or unpaid. Mark the watch as potentially solvent, he said dryly. If they survive, they will be interesting clients. If they don't, we will have larger problems. He picked up the letter again. And send a copy of this, he added, to our contact in Pentos, the one with an ear to the Targaryen girl. Tell her that when she is done in the east, there is a wall of stone and ice that would make an intriguing investment. Coins clicked, quills scratched. The bank returned to its work. The echo of the far north folded into its understanding of what the world owed and what it feared. The plan was simple. It was also, in Jon's opinion, stupid. Capture 1, Daemon had said. Alive, or as close to it as these things get. Bind it, bring it south. Show the world what they prefer to call stories. Jeor had grumbled and cursed and finally agreed, with the weary resignation of a man who knew that words alone would never pry lords out of their warm halls. Now the Wight thrashed, and simplicity went the way of summer. The net held, barely. Chains dug into ice-crusted limbs, leather straps creaked. The dead man, wildling by the look of his frozen furs, snapped at the brothers who pulled, his blue eyes burning with mindless hunger. Each jerk of his body sent ripples through the lines, nearly yanking men off their feet. "Pull, you bastards," a sergeant barked. "If this thing breaks loose, it eats you first." Jon kept Longclaw between himself and the thing's teeth, point hovering just out of reach. "Don't get near its mouth," he warned, "or its hands. They grab. We could just cut its head off," one brother panted. "Carry that. Would make the point just as well." "Jeor wants it animated," Daemon said. "Lords trust their eyes more when the monster is moving. They can lie about a head." He stepped forward, torch held high. The Wight snarled, jerking toward the flame. Its flesh did not burn, not at once, but smoke curled from its skin where the heat touched, and its movements grew more frenzied. "Keep the fire close," Daemon ordered. "Not enough to char it. Enough to remind it it's not welcome." Carax's shadow passed overhead, blacking out the stars for a heartbeat. The dragon's presence made the air hum. Even the Wight jerked at the edges of the net as if some instinct recoiled from the old, deep threat of fire made flesh. Jon's arms burned from holding Longclaw ready. "This is mad," he said through gritted teeth. "Dragging one of these things across half a realm in hopes someone listens." "It is," Daemon agreed, "but so is standing on an ice wall in the path of an army of dead. Mad plans for mad times." The Wight lunged. The net jerked. A brother lost his footing, going down in a tangle of limbs. The Wight's hands clawed toward him, fingernails ripping at the man's cloak. Ghost darted in. The direwolf's jaws snapped shut on the Wight's wrist. Bone cracked. Ghost yanked, ripping the limb away. Blue light flared in the severed hand, then flickered. The Wight writhed, reaching with its remaining arm. "Enough," Daemon said. He jabbed the torch toward its face. The flame licked at dead skin. The smell of burning rot gagged the men nearest, but they held their grips. The Wight shrieked, a choked, ugly sound, and thrashed, then sagged, stunned but not extinguished. "Move," Daemon ordered. "Get it onto the sledge. Bind the net tight. We have a ship to catch." "A ship?" Jon echoed. "To Eastwatch," Daemon said. "To whatever fool Stannis sends north next. To a realm that won't believe otherwise." Jon stared at the Wight, at the thing that had once been a man and now was a message. "I hope it's worth it," he said. "It won't be," Daemon said, "but it will be necessary." The hold stank of salt, tar, and something far worse. Davos had been in cramped spaces before, smuggling runs in low, sweating ships packed with onions or contraband. He had never shared one with a thing that did not breathe but refused to lie still. The Wight slammed into the cage again. The wood creaked but did not give. The smiths at Eastwatch had reinforced it with iron bands. The black metal etched crudely with marks Sam claimed were copied from old tomes about first men and children. Chains wrapped the outside, their links humming faintly in the lamplight. His eyes burned. Blue constant, wrong. It snapped its jaws at Davos, teeth clacking. "Seven save me," Davos muttered. "And the Lord of Light too, if he's listening. This is what you fight up there." "This is one sliver of what we fight," Daemon said. He ducked under a low beam, the ship's roll barely touching his balance. "You volunteered," he reminded Davos. "Stannis asked," Davos corrected. "I owe him more than my life. I wasn't about to send some nameless boy to bring proof of the end of the world while I stayed on my rock." The captain of the ship, a hard-bitten man with earrings of cheap bronze and a scar across his cheek, hovered near the ladder, eyes never leaving the cage. "That thing stays chained," he said. "If it breaks loose, I'll burn half this bloody boat to ash before I let it near my men." "Agreed," Daemon said. He crouched, bringing his face level with the bars. The Wight snarled, leaning toward him. Frost smoked around its mouth. Its skin had begun to tighten and crack in the drier air, but it showed no sign of weakening. "It's learning," Daemon murmured. Davos shot him a look. "How in all the hells can you tell that?" he demanded. "First ones we saw moved like puppets," Daemon said. "Now they pull at ropes, test knots, throw themselves at weak points. They adapt. If it starts tearing its own limbs off to slip the chains, we get the captain his fire." Davos shuddered. "You say that like you've seen it," he said. "In other wars," Daemon replied. "Other dead, other mistakes. I told you the world has more kinds of wrong than this. This one just happens to be hungry for the whole of it." The ship lurched. Above, sailors shouted. The Wight's eyes flared. It threw itself against the bars again, rattling chains. "When we reach Dragonstone," Davos said, "Stannis will want it brought before him. Melisandre will say it's a sign. The lords will say it's a trick. You'll tell them what you know," Daemon said. "What you saw, what you felt in your bones when you stood on our wall. That the cold is not a story. That this thing is one of many, not a lone monster." Davos nodded slowly. "And you?" he asked. "What will you do while I'm telling kings that the world is ending?" Daemon's eyes went distant. "Stand on the wall," he said, "and watch. And try to keep the boy alive long enough to hear what answer your king sends back." The Godswood at Castle Black was nothing like Winterfell's. The heart tree was smaller, its branches thinner, its roots more shallow. The pool at its base was a crust of ice rather than a steaming mirror. Yet it had a presence, a quiet weight, as if the old gods had agreed to stand here out of obligation if not enthusiasm. Jon knelt in the snow. Longclaw lay across his knees, its dark blade catching the starlight in broken glints. Ghost lay beside him, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. He was not praying, not exactly. Words felt clumsy when addressed to carved faces and old sap. He thought, instead, of Ned's letter, of Daemon's confession, of the Wight on the ship, of the walker in the trees at Craster's, of Dany, though he had never seen her, imagined only from Sam's stories and Daemon's muttered references. Another ember. A soft cough broke the stillness. Jon turned. Daemon leaned against a tree, one hand braced on the bark. The other was pressed to his mouth, a scrap of cloth held between his fingers. For a moment Jon saw the way the man's shoulders shook, the quiet intensity of the cough. When Daemon lowered the cloth, something dark smeared its surface before the old man folded it quickly into his palm. "Old age?" Jon asked. Daemon snorted. "If only," he said. "Old bargains, old wounds, old debts." He pushed himself upright. "Even fire rots if you keep it in the wrong container too long," he said. "Whatever the Shadowbinders did to hold me between life and death for this little encore, it was never meant to last forever." Jon's mouth went dry. "You're dying," he said. Daemon shrugged, as if it were of no great concern. "So is everyone," he said. "I am simply closer to the point where the world stops asking my opinion." He limped closer, favoring one leg today. Some days it was the other. Sleep in Asshai had left its marks unevenly. "I thought," Jon began, then stopped, searching for words. "You seemed unkillable," Daemon suggested. "I'm not. I'm just stubborn. That buys time, not immortality." He sat down in the snow with a grunt, leaning against a root. Ghost sniffed at him, then reluctantly accepted his presence. "Listen," Daemon said. Jon did. "I won't be here for the end," Daemon said. "Not the real one. Not the moment when the dead finally decide they've tested enough and move in force. Or the moment when the girl comes west. Or the moment when the realm finally sees clearly for once and decides what kind of world it wants after the ice cracks." Jon's fingers tightened on Longclaw. "You don't know that," he said. "I do," Daemon replied. "I know my limits. They're closer than they were when I was dueling green boys over who got to wear black and red in King's Landing." He turned his head, looking up at the heart tree's carved face. "I asked to live long enough to see my house remade," he said. "I did not ask to live long enough to see every consequence of that remaking. That was presumptuous, perhaps even for me." Jon swallowed. "What are you saying?" he asked. Daemon shifted his gaze back to him. "I am saying," he said, "that the time is coming when you and the girl and whatever stubborn kings stand between you will have to decide without me telling you how. That my role is almost done." Jon's chest tightened. "You said you would make me your heir," he said. "Teach me, guide me, not disappear." Daemon's laugh was soft and rough. "I'm not vanishing tonight," he said, "or tomorrow, unless some walker decides to make my timetable irrelevant. But I feel the edges fraying. My strength goes further some days than others. There will come a day soon when I climb the wall and don't have breath left to come back down." Jon looked at the sword in his lap, at the scar in his palm. "A ghost. What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "I want you to stop thinking of me as your answer," Daemon said, "and start thinking of me as your warning. I burned a realm chasing a crown I thought was necessary. Rhaegar died chasing a prophecy he thought was kind. Don't repeat us." He leaned forward, eyes intent. "When the girl comes," he said, "remember you share more than a name. When Stannis or some other king demands your kneel or your death, remember Ned's letter. When the dead stand under this wall in numbers that make our little skirmishes look like children's games, remember that you have the right to choose something other than heroic suicide." Jon let out a sharp breath. "You want a lot," he said. "I want you to live," Daemon said simply. "Not as a symbol. As a man who can carry what I can't." He coughed again, turning his head. "What if I fail?" Jon asked. "Then you fail," Daemon said, "and winter wins, and the world goes quiet, and I'll be past caring. But until that happens, I will be very annoyed with you wherever I am." Despite himself, Jon smiled grimly. "I'll do my best to avoid your annoyance," he said. "Good," Daemon replied. "The gods know it's kept me alive this long." The dead noticed, not in the way men did, counting heads and names, tallying the absence of a particular corpse in their morbid ranks. They felt instead the lack of a thread in the tapestry that bound their will to their tools. A Wight gone, not burned under their gaze, not shattered in battle where their senses could follow its unmaking. Taken, cut off, lost. On a low ridge, the walker paused. Its eyes flared, casting a faint blue glow on the snow at its feet. Frost cracked softly along its armor as something like irritation rippled through it. Men had moved, not just on the wall, where their heat gathered in predictable patterns. Not just in the wild camps, where wildlings still scattered before the cold. They had taken one of the dead's pieces and carried it beyond sight. It lifted a hand. The air around its fingers thickened, moisture condensing, freezing. Snowflakes formed out of clear sky, spiraling faster and faster. The wind picked up, keening through the branches. The forest darkened, not just from clouds, but from density. Snow packing the air, turning distance into a blur. Sound dulled, shapes smudged. The cold deepened, sinking deeper into bark and bone. The walker's thoughts spread. Not words, pressure, instruction, storm. Where once they had simply walked behind the night, happy to let natural dark cloak their advance. Now they reached out, tugged at old, thin threads in the world's fabric. Storms had always come in winter. Now they came sharper, stranger, with direction. The warg thing with the white coat, the boy with the black sword, the old dragon in the sky. They had moved boldly under clear stars. Let them try under this. Snow rose. Blizzards had voices, if one knew how to listen. This one howled in a new tongue, part ice, part something older. It did not simply obscure, probed. It tested the strength of walls and the patience of men. Far to the south, clouds began to gather above the wall, thick and heavy, drawn by a will that did not know mercy or haste, only the inexorable logic of cold. The storm arrived in stages. First, the sky darkened, as if the sun had simply decided it was tired and went to bed early. Then the wind picked up, hissing along the ice, plucking at cloaks and loose ropes. The first snowflakes were fat and slow, drifting more than falling. Then the wall vanished. Snow drove sideways in thick, relentless sheets. It stung exposed skin, bit at eyes, found every gap in clothing. Men shouted to one another and heard only muffled echoes. Torches in their brackets sputtered and went out, flames snuffed by gusts that seemed almost targeted. Jon could barely see the man in front of him. "Gate!" someone yelled. "Close the bloody gate!" They were on the outer rampart, at a narrow access point used for hoisting supplies up from the base. The heavy wooden gate that covered it was half open, chains rattling as the wind grabbed at it, trying to wrench it free. "Pull!" Jon shouted. He threw his weight against the lever, muscles trembling. Two brothers beside him swore and leaned in. The gate groaned, inching down. Snow poured through the gap, stinging their faces. "Where did this come from?" one of the men gasped. "It's winter," another snapped. "No," Jon said, teeth chattering. "This is more." He thought of the walker on the ridge, of the way the air had thickened around its hand, of the instinctive, deep wrongness that had rippled through Ghost when the first gust hit. Somewhere above, Caraxes roared. The sound was strangled by the storm, dragged sideways and shredded, but it was there, a ragged, furious tearing of the sky. Jon caught glimpses of the dragon through the white, a dark shape buffeted by the wind, wings straining, tail whipping. Fire flared once, a brief orange gouge in the blizzard, then vanished. "Get him down!" Daemon's voice cut through the gale, anger sharpened by worry. He stood near the main parapet, cloak snapping like a banner. Snow plastered his hair to his skull, frosted his beard. His eyes were narrow slits against the sting. "Down, you idiot!" he bellowed in Valyrian. The words ripped from his mouth by the wind. Caraxes wheeled. He fought the currents, wings beating in powerful strokes that sent whirls of snow spinning. Slowly, laboriously, he forced his way back toward the wall, claws gouging at the ice as he sought a purchase. The gate slammed shut with a final, bone-jarring thud. Jon sagged against the lever. His lungs burned. His eyelashes were crusted with ice. The world had shrunk to the circle of his immediate effort, to keeping wood and iron moving against a storm that felt targeted. "This isn't natural," he shouted to no one in particular. Daemon heard him. "Nothing about them is," he shouted back. "Get below, before you're blown off like a leaf." Jon shook his head. "I'm on watch," he yelled. "You're on a suicide balcony," Daemon snapped. "Move, Snow. You can't fight ice by letting it peel you off this wall." As if to underscore the point, a gust hit. It slammed into Jon with the force of a physical blow. He staggered, one foot skidding on the slick stone. For a heartbeat, he felt nothing under his heel but air. A white shape crashed into his side. Ghost. The direwolf's weight bore him sideways, away from the edge. Jon grabbed blindly at the parapet, fingers scrabbling until they found purchase. He dragged himself down, crouching, heart hammering. "Fine," he shouted. "Below it is." He and Ghost half ran, half fell down the nearest stair, snow chasing them like a living thing. Behind them, Caraxes finally latched onto the wall. His claws sank into the ice, massive body hugging the leeward side. He snarled, smoke and sparks escaping between clenched teeth. Daemon stayed on the rampart a moment longer, hands braced on the stone, eyes narrowed against the fury. He could feel it. In his bones, in his teeth, in the old scars under his skin. This was not chance. This was a test. The hall shook, not dramatically. No great cracks opened in the walls, no beams snapped, but enough that dust sifted down from the rafters, peppering men's hair and bowls. The sound that accompanied it was a low, resonant groan, as if something vast and old had shifted under strain. "7 bloody hells," a steward muttered. "Is the wall complaining?" "It's held worse," a ranger said. but his tone held more hope than conviction. The storm howled outside. Wind shoved at the heavy doors, making their iron hinges scream. Smoke from the hearth fire backed up briefly in a gust, sending a cough of black into the hall before the draft caught again. Men hunched over their food, shoulders tight, ears tuned more to the noises beyond the stone than to the clatter of spoons. Jeor Mormont stood near the hearth. His cloak steamed, drops of melted snow hissing where they fell too close to the embers. He barked orders at anyone foolish enough to idle. Check the lashings on the outer gates, make sure the fires in the towers did not go out, double the watch at the main gate even if they could barely see their own hands. Jon stood before him, ghost pressed against the back of his legs. Hit all at once, Jon was saying. One moment the sky was clear, the next, it wasn't. Felt like the cold at the fist, only bigger, intent, like something was looking at us. Jeor's brows drew together. You think the storm is their doing, he said. I think nothing else I've seen behaves like this, Jon said. Daemon shook snow from his cloak. The dead do not need storms to hide in, he said. They move well enough under any sky, but they learn. We took one of their toys. They tugged at the weather like a spoiled child tugging a curtain. Jeor grunted. And if they tug harder? He asked. If they decide to bring the whole bloody curtain down? Then, Daemon said, we see how well this wall remembers why it was built. Another rumble shivered through the stone. Sam stumbled in from the side door, cheeks red, eyes wide behind fogged lenses. The maester says the barometer. He started, then shook his head, flustered. The glass thing with the water and the mark. It dropped further than he's ever seen. He says the storm isn't just weather. It's pressure. On the wall. Jeor's jaw clenched. Tell him to keep his glass thing from freezing, he said. If this is the others doing, I want to know whether it gets worse or just loud. Sam bobbed his head and scurried off. The hall groaned again. Somewhere above, ice cracked. Not in a catastrophic slip, but in a series of sharp, staccato reports, like distant musket fire. Men went still. Eat, Jeor barked. Drink. Sleep if you can. You won't help the wall by staring at the ceiling and pissing yourselves every time it sighs. He glanced at Jon and Daemon. You too, he said. Stay awake. If the ice falls, I want you moving before it decides where it wants your heads. Jon swallowed. Yes, my lord, he said. Daemon's eyes were distant. I've heard a wall complain like this before, he said softly. Jeor shot him a sharp look. And? He demanded. Daemon's mouth twisted. The last time, he said. Men on both sides of it were too busy arguing over whose banners looked better in the wind to notice. He looked around at the hungry, frightened, stubborn faces in the hall. Let's not repeat that, he said. The rain at Dragonstone came sideways. It slashed in off the narrow sea, blurred ships' masts into silhouettes and turned the flagstones slick beneath Davos's boots. The sky squatted low over the island, an unbroken sheet of iron. Lines secure, someone yelled. The cog bumped against the dock again, fenders squealing. Ropes creaked as men hauled tight. The ship that had carried onions and smuggled goods in another life now bore something the world had not seen in an age. Easy, Davos called. Careful with that, lads. If it breaks loose, you'll wish it was only the sea trying to eat you. The cage did not move. It sat near the mainmast, iron bands dull in the gray light. Chains wrapped it, links threaded through ringbolts sunk deep into the deck. Through the bars Davos could see it. The flicker of blue, the pale, clenched hands, the constant, mindless motion. The Wight slammed itself toward the light as if it sensed land. The chains rattled. One of the ship's boys flinched, crossing himself nervously. Leave off, the captain growled at the Wight. You've had your share of the journey. Davos stepped onto the gangplank, legs adjusting automatically to the roll. Stannis would be up there in the keep, he knew, scowling over some parchment, jaw set, eyes fixed on a problem he would bully with sheer will if he could. Melisandre would be near his shoulder, the ruby at her throat pulsing faintly as she muttered about kings and fires and chosen swords. He looked back once at the cage. "Come on then," he muttered. "Let's see if you're what makes the difference. Or just another horror no one wants to believe in." They brought the cage into the hall on a sled. The scrape of wood on stone echoed off the vaulted ceiling, joining the constant crackle of the torches and the low roar of the great fire. Stone dragons loomed from the walls, mouths open as if ready to belch flame at the thing within. "Stop," Stannis said. The men hauling the sled obeyed at once. The cage shuddered to a halt in the center of the hall. "Open it," Stannis ordered. The captain from Eastwatch paled. "Your Grace," he began. "It's—" "Do as he says," Melisandre cut in gently. Her eyes shone in the torchlight, the ruby at her throat pulsing. "The king must see the darkness with his own eyes." Davos moved before the captain could argue himself into foolishness. "We open a little," he said. "We keep the chains. We don't need it strolling about the hall making introductions." He nodded to two of the Dragonstone men. Reluctantly, they stepped forward, hands shaking as they worked at the bolts holding one corner of the cage's door shut. The iron screamed as it shifted. The stench spilled out first. Rot and old blood and something colder than either. Several men gagged. One young knight swore and clapped a hand over his mouth. Then the Wight lunged. It hit the bars with a force that rattled the cage. Fingers clawed through the gap at the top of the door where the bolts had come loose. Blue eyes, set deep in a sunken face, burned with mindless hunger. Stannis did not flinch. His jaw tightened, but his gaze remained fixed, weighing, as if the Wight were another petition, another supplicant asking for judgment. "Gods," one of the lords muttered. What is it?" "Dead," Davos said. "Or it should be. Buried in the snow beyond the wall." It got up again. "They all do if you don't burn them." The Wight screamed. It was a raw animal sound, scraping out of a throat that should not have been able to make it. It clawed at the bars, nails ripping, skin tearing, unfazed by its own damage. Melisandre's eyes narrowed. "This is no servant of the Lord of Light," she said. "This is the dark given form." She stepped forward, lifting one hand. The Wight's eyes flicked to her. It lunged, hands flailing through the gap. Stannis's knuckles whitened on the arm of his chair. "Show me," he said. Melisandre's lips curved. "As you wish, your grace," she murmured. She reached for the brazier that had been brought in specially, charcoal and oil already burning low. With a flick of her wrist, she sent some of its contents splashing through the bars. Fire kissed dead flesh. The Wight thrashed. Flame raced along its arms, catching in the tatters of its furs, licking up toward its face. The creature shrieked again, flailing, setting the straw at the bottom of the cage aflame. The men nearest the sled stumbled back, one falling flat in his haste. The Wight burned. It did not fall at once. It clawed and howled, blue eyes blazing brighter, then flickering, then, finally, failing. The light went out all at once, like a candle snuffed. What remained was a collapsing skeleton of blackened bone and ash. The hall was very quiet. Stannis exhaled. "How many?" he asked. Davos blinked. "Your Grace," he said. "How many of those?" Stannis repeated. Mormont's letter spoke of corpses in numbers. "Walkers. An army," he said, "if men were wise enough to name it so." Davos swallowed. "Enough, your Grace," he said. "More than enough if the letters are right." Stannis looked to Melisandre. "You spoke of a war to end all wars," he said. "A night that would not end. Is this what you meant?" Her smile was slow. "It is part of it," she said. "The great other's work. The cold that hates life. The darkness that wants all flames snuffed. You see now why I spoke of the wall." Stannis's eyes burned. "I see a threat," he said. "One my brothers laughed at. One the fat fool on the Iron Throne will drink away. One the lions will use as an excuse, if they believe it at all." He stood. "I will not," he said. "If the dead come south, they will find Stannis Baratheon standing in their path. The painted table was littered with new pieces. Someone, Davos suspected Melisandre, had set a small, black crow carving on the wall. Beside it lay a shard of dragonglass, its edges catching the candlelight, and a wedge of carved wood roughly whittled into the shape of a dragon. "King's Landing will say I am running," Stannis said. He did not sound concerned. "They will say Stannis flees his rightful war to chase phantoms in the snow while a boy king sits on my throne and Lannisters gnaw the realm. They already say that," Davos pointed out mildly. Stannis's mouth twitched. "Then they can say it louder," he said. "I have spent years fighting men who lie with every breath. Now the dead march. At least they are honest about what they want." Melisandre watched him. "The fire showed you this path," she said. "I saw your ships in the snow, your banners on walls of ice. I saw the dead break on your stubbornness." "You see many things," Stannis said, "some of which I cannot ignore, even if I wish to." He stabbed a finger at the wall. "We will sail to Eastwatch," he said. "What men, horses, and supplies I can spare. We will take Dragonglass and steel. We will take Melisandre's damned fires, if they help. We will hold the wall with Mormont until the true ally arrives." "Ally?" Davos echoed. "The girl," Stannis said. "Daenerys Targaryen, or whatever she calls herself now. If half the rumors are true, she has dragons. Fire. If she is wise, she will learn that winter cares nothing for whose father sat one throne or another." Melisandre's smile was sharp. "Two fires," she murmured, "meeting on the ice." Davos rubbed at the stump of his fingers. "And the throne?" he asked. "Your grace, the South, the debtors, the hungry, the betrayed. You'll leave them to stew in their own corruption," Stannis said flatly. "For now, if we do not hold that wall, there will be no South worth ruling. No harvests to tax, no fields to burn, only white and cold and silence." He met Davos's gaze. "You have stood on that wall now," he said. "You brought me the dead in chains. Do you think I'm wrong?" Davos shook his head slowly. "No, your grace," he said. "I think, for once, the world has offered you a war worthy of you." Stannis let out a short breath that might almost have been a laugh. "Get the men ready," he said. "We leave when the tides allow, and send word to Mormont. Tell him Stannis Baratheon comes north. He can like it or not as he pleases. The dead won't care either way." When the storm finally cleared, it left the world sharper. The sky was a brittle blue, cloudless. The air was so cold that each breath felt like swallowing knives. Every surface glittered. Ice and snow and frost on stone turned for a few hours into something almost beautiful, until one looked closer. Cracks webbed the wall. Hairline in most places harmless. Deeper in others, thin black lines where ice had shifted under its own enormous weight. The storm had hammered at it, probing for weaknesses, finding some. Jon ran a gloved hand along one such fracture. It was no wider than his little finger, but it ran down into the blue for yards, vanishing into deeper ice. He felt the faintest breath of moving air seeping out, a whisper where there should have been none. "How bad?" he asked. Daemon squinted. "Bad enough to make your old bear's beard whiter," he said. "Not bad enough to fall. Yet." He tapped the ice with his knuckles, listening. "The wall is like an old soldier," he said. "Too many scars, not enough rest. Can be patched, supported, but every blow counts now." Jon looked north. The forest was a black line again, the storm's fury erased from the visible world. No blue glimmers moved between the trees in the bright morning light. "They were testing us," he said. "Us," Daemon agreed. "And this," he thumped the ice. "Remember what the old books say," he went on. "The wall isn't just frozen water piled high. There's craft in it. Power. Old bargains, old magic. Pushes back. They push harder. Can we mend it?" Jon asked. "With whatever the children used?" Daemon snorted. "If I knew how to pour spells into stone, I'd have used them on more interesting things than a frozen fence, he said. But Sam and Aemon will comb their scrolls. You will keep men off the weakest spots when the wind howls. And when Stannis arrives, he let the thought hang. Stannis, Jon said, startled. Daemon smiled tightly. Davos's ship made Dragonstone, he said. The Raven came this morning. Dragonstone sends glass. And Stannis Baratheon sends himself, with as many ships and men as his rock can spare. Jon's first reaction was almost resentment. Another king, another banner, another set of demands and oaths and loyalties, when they could ill afford them. Then he remembered the Wight in the cage, the way Davos had flinched at it, the way a man like Stannis might look at such a thing and not dismiss it as a trick. We'll have more men, Jon said slowly. More fire, more trouble. Yes to all three, Daemon said. Kings are trouble by definition, but he brings glass and ships. We need both. The trick will be keeping him from trying to plant a banner in the ice and declare himself Lord of the Wall. Jon huffed. He can declare what he likes, he said. The wall doesn't bend to crowns. Daemon's eyes glinted. Tell him that, he said. I would pay good coin to see his face. Sam's voice shook only a little. And so I, Stannis of House Baratheon, by the grace of God's King of the Undulls and the First Men, do declare my intent to march north to the wall with men, ships, and such weapons as Dragonstone can spare. I come not to usurp the Night's Watch's charge, but to aid it in the defense of the realm against the threat named in your letters. He paused, frowning. Any who would stand with me against this darkness will be welcomed as allies. Any who stand against me while the dead walk will be remembered accordingly. Signed, Stannis Baratheon. He looked up. That sounds like him, Jon said, though he'd never heard the man speak. It fit the picture Davos and Daemon had painted, hard, rigid, uncompromising. Self-righteous, Daemon said, but not wrong. Not this time. Aemon folded his hands in his lap. Stannis Baratheon is not a man I ever expected to call ally, he murmured. Yet here we are. He's not here yet, Jon said. Ships and men can still sink. Kings can still change their minds. True, Daemon said, but he has seen the dead. That makes a different mark than ink or flame. Sam's eyes brightened behind their fogged lenses. He also says, he added, riffling the parchment, that he's sending ahead more glass, and what's this, a living proof of the dead. The Wight you captured, Jon. He showed it to Stannis in his hall. Jon swallowed. He burned it? He asked. Sam nodded. Davos writes in a postscript, he said. It burnt the same as the one at your wall, Jon Snow. Stannis saw its eyes. Melisandre called it the great other's work. Daemon's lip curled. I care little what name they put on it, he said, so long as they agree it needs killing. Aemon smiled faintly. The Lord of Light and the old gods may not share hymns, he said, but perhaps they can at least share enemies. Jon pushed off the wall. What happens when he gets here? He asked. Stannis. Does he take over? Try to order the watch? He's a king. He'll expect bowing. The watch bows to no crown, Sam blurted, then blushed. That's what the oaths say. I mean, in the texts. Text or not, it's true, Jon said. We take no part in the wars of the realm. Stannis will argue this isn't a war of the realm, Daemon said. He'll say it's something bigger. He won't be wrong, but you're right to worry about lines. Men up here have sworn to a different kind of duty than his. Aemon's blind gaze shifted as if he could see them both. Lines blur in storms, he said. Kings or crows, we all bleed the same when the ice cuts. The trick will be remembering why you took your vows when a king offers you other oaths. Jon thought of Ned's letter. Honor as ground, he said quietly. Not chain. Exactly, Aemon said. The sea was calmer the morning they left. The storm that had battered the coast had blown itself out, leaving the sky high and pale, streaked with thin clouds. The water was a flat, metallic gray, broken only by the wake of Stannis' ships. Dragonstone dwindled behind them, the great carved dragons shrinking to shadows on the horizon. Stannis stood at the prow of his flagship. He wore fur-lined armor, black and plain. No jewels, no gold. His only concession to vanity was the flaming heart of R'hllor worked into the stag on his breast, a compromise he had accepted with visible reluctance after Melisandre's insistence that symbols mattered. "They'll say I fled my throne," he said. His voice carried over the creak of the timbers and the slap of water against the hull. "They already say worse," Davos replied. Stannis's jaw flexed. "If I save this realm," he said, "I expect it to remember who did it, even if they hate me for it." "The dead won't remember," Melisandre said softly. "Only the living, and their memory is mutable." Stannis snorted. "I'll settle for a few honest songs," he said. He looked north. No wall was visible from here, only endless sea. "Davos," he said, "you saw the wall, the men, the dead. Do you think we have enough?" Davos thought of the thin line of black cloaks, the deep blue fissures in the ice, the way the Wight had slammed itself against the cage with tireless ferocity. "No," he said honestly, "but I think you're the only one sailing in the right direction." Melisandre's eyes shone. "The fire did not lie," she murmured. "Your path is north, to the wall, to the place where the darkness presses hardest." Stannis's gaze dropped briefly to the deck. Below, in the hold, the cage sat empty. They had burned the Wight the night before they sailed, on Melisandre's urging. There was no sense, she had said, in carrying such a thing into the storm and risk losing the ship to its chains. Stannis had watched it burn without flinching, then turned and ordered the cages reinforced anyway. "Proof enough has been had," he said. "Now we bring fire and glass to those who need it." The fleet moved steadily. No fanfare, no cheering crowds. Only the steady churn of oars, the snap of sails, the creak of wood, and the grim faces of men who sailed toward a war most of the world still denied. The Iron Throne looked no less ridiculous for the knowledge that the world was ending. Twisted swords, uncomfortable angles, steps designed to make men stumble. Joffrey slouched upon it like a boy on a stolen chair, crown askew. His fingers tapped impatiently on the arm, metal clinking. "What do you mean he's gone north?" he demanded. The messenger swallowed. He was dust-streaked, his cloak travel-stained, eyes too wide. The court stairs crowded him as surely as the walls. "Your Grace," he stammered. "Our ships watching Dragonstone report Stannis's fleet has sailed. Not east, not toward us, north, to..." He hesitated. "Spit it out," Cersei said, voice sharp. "To the wall, Your Grace," the man blurted. "To Eastwatch, with reports of strange cargo. Stone, black glass. Men say. They say he goes to fight. The dead." Laughter rippled around the hall. "The dead?" Joffrey repeated, grinning. "Uncle Stannis has finally lost what was left of his wits. He runs away from us to chase ghosts. If he runs from sense," Cersei said smoothly. "But he always did fancy himself noble. Let him freeze. The wall loves martyrs." Varys's expression did not change. Inwardly, his mind raced, tallying connections. Jeor's letter, the copy he had sent east, the reports from Gulltown of odd early snows, the whisperer's murmur of a white shadow seen in the mountains of the moon. Littlefinger's eyes gleamed. "North," he said. "How unexpected. We might yet find uses in that." "How?" Joffrey snapped. "He's gone where the goats live. Who cares? Goats have gold sometimes," Littlefinger said. "And sometimes other assets." Cersei's gaze flicked to him. "Speak plainly, Lord Baelish," she said. "Plainly?" Littlefinger said. "Very well. While Stannis plays at savior of the realm on an ice wall, he leaves Dragonstone lightly defended. He leaves Storm's End to his few loyalists. He leaves the Baratheon name bleeding credibility." He smiled. "If he comes back with tales of white monsters, we call him mad," he said. "If he doesn't come back, we call him dead. Either way, the Lannister hold on the South Titans. Varys's fan fluttered. And if, he said softly, the tales of white monsters are true, if the letters from the wall are more than the ramblings of old men. The court chuckled. Joffrey waved a hand. Then the wall will keep them out, he said. That's what it's for. Let the crows earn their salt. We have enough real enemies without chasing children's stories. Varys smiled politely. Yes, he said. Of course, your grace. He lowered his eyes. For now. Astapor's stink was different from Craster's, but no less foul. Rotting fish, human waste, old blood baked into sun-warmed stone. The red bricks of the city's walls glowed under the afternoon sun. The wide harbor beyond full of ships bobbing at anchor. Daenerys rode at the head of her ragged column. Silver moved with familiar grace beneath her, ears flicking at the sounds of the city. Behind, her Khalasar, reduced but hardened by the red waste, rode more uneasily. They did not care for walls or for collars. Overhead, Drogon wheeled. Regal and Viserion flew closer to the ground, their smaller wings laboring. The Unsullied in the plaza stiffened at the sight of them. The slightest tightening of ranks betraying nerves their training would not allow them to show otherwise. You do not have to buy them, Jeor murmured. Not all of them. There are other ways. Mercenaries, freedmen. And leave these men in chains? Daenerys asked. To be used and thrown away by others? She shook her head. No. If I must play the slaver to free them, I will. And when I cross the sea, I will not bring only dragons to the wall. I will bring men who know how to stand when everything in them tells them to die quietly. The thought surprised her even as she said it. The wall. She had never seen it, only in maps and fires. But it hovered at the edge of her mind now like a second horizon. For every brick she walked past in Astapor, she thought of ice. For every Unsullied drilled in a square, she thought of black cloaks on white towers. The slave trader, Krasny's Aemon, waited with his whip and his greasy smile. He looked at Drogon and saw a commodity. He looked at her and saw a foreign girl to be cheated. He looked at the Unsullied and saw coin. Daenerys looked at them all and saw tools. Tools she would turn against men like him, against cities like this, against chains east and west. And after Astapor? Jorah asked. Yunkai, she said. Meereen. And when the east is bleeding enough that the west smells it, then we sail. West? The priestess murmured. To the snow. In time, Daenerys said. She fixed her eyes on the gates ahead. First, she said, I need an army that can stand next to dragons and not run. The wall will not be defended by fire alone. The storm had left everyone tired. Men moved slower, shoulders heavier. Even the constant background murmur of Castle Black had dulled, as if the gale had stolen some of the sound from the world and no one had yet found a way to put it back. Jon's cell felt smaller than usual. The bed was narrow, the straw mattress lumpy. The single candle on the table burned lower than he liked, wax pooling in a wide dish. Longclaw rested against the wall in easy reach. Ghost snored softly, paws twitching, chasing something in his dreams. Jon read the letter again. He could recite it by heart now, but there was comfort in seeing the shape of the words, the familiar tilt of the letters. Ned Stark's voice whispered under the scratch of the quill. Honor as ground, not chain. He set it down as Daemon's knuckles brushed lightly against the doorframe. May I? The old man asked. Jon gestured. It's not mine to bar, he said. The wall doesn't stand on my door. Daemon stepped in. He moved more stiffly tonight. Jon noticed it in the way he turned his shoulders, the subtle favoring of his left leg, the little tightness at the corners of his mouth. The storm had taken something out of him that the day had not returned. Stannis will reach Eastwatch in a week, Daemon said. Weather allowing. We'll have warning when his ships are in sight. Jon nodded. You've met him, he said. In King's Landing. On Dragonstone. What is he like? Daemon snorted. Hard, he said. Inflexible. Honest, in the way of men who find lying too much effort. He will not flatter you. Or the Watch. or anyone. He will tell you he is king and expect you to treat him as such." Jon grimaced. "And we can't," he said. "Not the way he expects. We can respect him, fight with him, but not kneel." "Exactly," Daemon said. "It will chafe him. He will hide it badly. It will chafe Jeor. He will hide it worse. Your job, somewhere between them, will be to keep them from wasting energy on whose title weighs more while the ice waits." Jon's head throbbed. "And you?" he asked. "Where do you stand between them?" Daemon's smile was faint. "Behind you," he said. "For as long as I can stand anywhere." Jon looked at him. "You're getting worse," he said bluntly. Daemon raised a brow. "Honesty," he said. "A stark trait. Yes. The cold bites deeper than it used to. The climbing is harder. The fire smokes more." He touched his chest, not quite over his heart, as if feeling for some internal crack. "I have time," he said. "Not as much as I once did. Enough, I hope, to see you and the king and the girl pointed at the same enemy instead of each other." Jon exhaled. "And if you don't?" he asked. Daemon shrugged. "Then you'll have to make do without an old fool whispering in your ear," he said. "You have the sword, the wolf, the letters, the wall. That's more than I had when I started burning things I shouldn't." Jon glanced at Longclaw. "I'm not you," he said. "Good," Daemon replied. "One of me was enough." He hesitated. "When Stannis comes," he said quietly, "he may ask you who you are, truly. Ned's son, Lioness, Rhaegar's, Snow, Targaryen, the Watches, mine." Jon's throat tightened. "What do I tell him?" he asked. "Tell him," Daemon said, "whatever keeps his sword pointed at the dead and not at your neck. And whatever lets you sleep at night afterward." Jon huffed a laugh that wasn't quite amused. "Simple, then," he said. "Simple," Daemon agreed. "Hard, but simple." Dawn came late to Eastwatch. The sun struggled up over a horizon blurred by sea fog and blown ice, its light weak and watery. The wall's eastern end plunged straight down into the water here, a sheer cliff of ice that loomed over the squat tower and the clustered buildings huddled against it. On the ramparts, the wind was a living thing. Tore at cloaks, chewed at ears and noses, stole breath. Jon hunched into his furs, ghost pressed against his leg. The direwolf's eyes narrowed against the sting. Behind them, Caraxes crouched, his wings folded tight, his tail curled protectively around his body. The dragon disliked the smell of the sea, but he tolerated it. "Ships," Daemon said. Jon squinted. At first, they were only darker smudges against the gray water. Then masts resolved. Sails, the faint glint of banners, stags, flaming hearts. The painted prows of Blackwater ships pressed into a new service. "Stannis," Jon breathed. On the dock below, Cotter Pike and his men stamped their feet. "These damned southern fools," Pike muttered, "bringing their wars to my doorstep. If they start arguing about chairs down here, I'll throw them back in the sea." "They're bringing glass and men," Jon said. "We need both. We need men who know how to listen," Pike replied. "We'll see if this king does." The first galley nosed toward the pier, sail furled, oars feathering delicately. Lines flew, were caught, pulled tight. Stannis stood at the prow. Even at this distance, Jon could see the set of his shoulders, the rigid line of his spine. He wore black and fur, his crown nowhere visible. He looked less like a king arriving in state and more like a man disembarking at a job site he already resented. "Impressive," Daemon said dryly. "He's as cheerful as ever." Jon's heart thudded. This was it. The South, with all its crowns and claims and history, had come to the foot of the wall. The choices Aemon and Daemon had spoken of, the ones Ned's letter had hinted at, had ceased to be abstract. "Time to see," Daemon said softly. "What happens when fire from the south meets the cold up here?" He rested a hand briefly on Jon's shoulder. "Remember," he murmured, "honor as ground, not chain, and that the dead don't give a damn whose banner flaps above them." Jon nodded. Below, Stannis stepped onto northern stone for the first time with the wall in his eye. Above, unseen from the dock, a White Walker lifted its head in the far north, feeling the new heat that had entered the game.